Shout out to Craig J for sending me this story. We talking about the everybody's favorite invader at the Capitol, whose name is Jacob Chansley, also known as the QAnon Shaman. And the last time we talked about him, he was talking about he had to have some kind of organic diet while he was locked up in jail, and they obliged and they gave it to him. Well, now he's back in the news again, and yes, he's still in jail, but now he is claiming that he wants to use the autism excuse as to why he did what he did. This is like the ultimate disrespect to those people out there who actually have autism. And I think we all know at least one person personally that has autism. And that is not something to joke around with. I don't believe for a second, a millisecond, that this man has autism. I mean, he's trying any and everything to plead a case. However, the good thing about this is nobody believes that this man has autism. Because this is the title. It says, now the QAnon shaman wants to use autism as an excuse, semicolon or colon, hell no. That's what it says. It says, lawyer for Jacob Chansley, better known as the QAnon shaman, offers bizarre, bigoted, and ignorant defense theory. Attorney Albert Watkins made news on Tuesday while trying to defend a man who participated in an attempted insurrection aimed at overturning a legitimate election. Watkins represents Jacob Chansley, the self-proclaimed QAnon shaman who donned a horned headdress, animal skins, and face paint, then joined a mob that stormed the U.S. Capitol on January 6th in service of a president who had trained his supporters to believe there was no legitimate way he could lose an election. Chansley was charged within days of the riot with knowingly entering or remaining in any restricted buildings or grounds without lawful authority and with violent entry and disorderly conduct on Capitol grounds. He has made it clear that, like most accused criminals, he does not want to be found guilty. So now his lawyer is using what I'm going to call the bumbling a spy defense. Stigmatize autistic people so your client can get away with a serious crime. I'm not suggesting autistic individuals are bumblers, to be clear. I myself am autistic and have interviewed subjects as diverse as Temple Grandin and Elmo the Puppet on this issue. But in the eyes of certain people, perhaps autism is perceived as an excuse for bumbling through life without being held accountable for your actions. Enter Albert Watkins. In a recent interview with Talking Points Memo, Watkins said his client has Asperger's syndrome and added that a lot of these defendants, and I'm going to use this colloquial term perhaps disrespectfully, but they're all effing short bus people. These are people with brain damage. They're effing retarded. They're on the goddamn spectrum. I can tell this is an op-ed piece that somebody wrote just by the language that they're using. Watkins proceeded to add that this quality of being effing retarded did not make the Capitol defendants bad people, but only that they were uniquely susceptible to 4+ years of goddamn propaganda, the likes of which the world has not seen since effing Hitler. Now, also with this, I don't know whose attorney this was, but someone I don't know if y'all heard it, but somebody had came out and said that something about this is how they tour, or something about touring. I'm like, how does touring a Capitol or any structure worth touring, why does it look like that? That's not what tours do. Like I said, it looked like they all escaped from the Washington Zoo. I've been to the zoo. It's been a while, but I've been to the Washington Zoo. And it looks like that's where they escaped from. Climbing on walls, climbing on the structure, climbing on stuff, just climbing everywhere, and they have the nerve to call us monkeys. It's difficult to discuss those remarks calmly, especially since it sounds like as if Watkins is being offensive and inflammatory on purpose. He is, of course, correct that 45 has used Hitler's infamous big lie tactic and other fascist methods to create a cult personality around himself, particularly after losing the 2020 election. But Watkins is offensively and dangerously wrong when he argues that autism had anything to do with Chansley's actions. Implying otherwise furthers harmful stigma that people with mental illnesses or developmental disabilities are more likely to be criminals, when in fact they are more likely to be victims of the crime. Watkins' use of slurs like retarded and terms like short bus people definitely does not help. Now, this is the attorney for this guy talking when he refers to people with autism in that way. So, he's not making a good case for him just on his vocabulary. Even worse, it reinforces the notion that people who are neurodiverse are somehow less than when compared to people who are neurotypical. that we are not merely different, but also damaged. This whole mess brings to mind Alec Maniason, a Canadian software developer who murdered 10 people, I remember him, in 2018 by driving his van into a crowded pedestrian area of Toronto. His reason, as stated in his online writings, was that he was angry about being involuntary celibate, or incel. When it was time to face the legal consequences for his gruesome act of mass murder, however, Maniason's attorney argued that his client, Autistic's way of thinking was severely distorted in a way similar to psychosis. Fortunately for people of common decency and common sense everywhere, that argument was rejected in court. Hopefully the same thing will happen in Chansley's case, but even if it does, the underlying issue revealed by Watkins' comments will still remain. We live in a culture that too often assumes that something is wrong with people who are not neurotypical. So when such people get caught committing crimes, even crimes as different as vehicular homicide or joining a mob riot, less scrupulous attorneys can try to play to public prejudice or misguided public sympathy, which is much the same thing, by claiming that they were somehow mentally broken. Autistic people are not damaged. We are not criminals. The QAnon shaman does not get to use my neurological difference as his shield. Psychological tendencies such as narcissistic feelings of shared omnipotence may well have played a role of why people like Chansley and hundreds of others found themselves storming the Capitol, but that was the result of choices they made and perhaps their social and cultural circumstances, not because of how they were wired. Jacob Chansley is entitled to a strong defense like any other criminal defendant, but if his attorney is going to throw neurodivergent people under the bus, short or otherwise, in order to get him off, he better be ready for us to call him out on it. Now, that was an article that was written by a person who actually has autism, and they penned that actually fairly well. So that doesn't sound like it was written by someone who was on the short bus to whoever this man's attorney is, or someone who was quote unquote retarded. That actually sounds like someone who knows what they're talking about, because they would clearly know from experience, as they have lived with this disability for most of all their life. So that's why it makes me so mad when you have PC trying to use the mental illness card, because there are actual people out here who have legit diagnosed on paper by an actual licensed physician disabilities where they can't think logically sometimes, or depending on what they have, they can't function like everybody else. And then you have people like this guy and his attorney trying to make a case that he has somehow now has autism, and that's what caused him to do what he did. And like the author said, when you say that, it's making it seem like people who have autism just, they will go and live a life of crime and then use autism as a defense. And what will happen is that's going to fall back onto the people who actually have autism, and people are going to look at them like they're crazy and that they're going to try to commit a crime whenever they are around someone who has it. So that's actually very dangerous rhetoric that this person is using. And I highly doubt that this Jacob Chansley, the QAnon shaman, as they call him, has autism. There is nothing wrong with this guy, except for the fact that he is balding and he just needs to just cut it all off. But yeah, I'm going to end the video on that note. Y'all let me know what y'all think about it down in the comments, and I'll talk to you in the next one.